Welcome back to another Redeemer Bible Talk. We're continuing through the book of Job. We finished Job chapter 1 last week, getting into Job chapter 2. And at the beginning of chapter 1, the greatest man in all the East, Job, by the end of chapter 1, he had lost everything he owned. He lost his 10 kids. They died. And as God allowed Satan to sift Job and test him, we see Job at the end of chapter 1. It says, in verse 20, at this Job got up, he tore his robe, shaved his head, and he fell on the ground in worship of God. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I shall depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. After all that suffering this great man endured, he was still worshiping and praising God. Chapter 1 leaves us, if you're like me, it leaves us with a gnawing question in our hearts. God, who are you to say your worship above my comfort? Another way to say it is, God, if you're about your worship and your praise in this world, then are we just pawns for you to use in order to create that? In my heart, as I read Job chapter 1, and it actually gets worse as we read Job chapter 2, my heart begins to ask those questions. And some of us allow these questions to push us into either a calloused heart saying, I don't like the way that God does that, so I'm just going to disregard him. I'm going to disregard his word, and I'm not going to follow him. Some of us go calloused on God. Some of us grow overconfident, or we grow prideful. We say, I actually don't think God knows best. I actually think I know better. I know God's intentions, and they're for harm. And we assume on God in a prideful way. These questions pop up as we read Job, and they push us into these two errors. But the truth is, as we read all of the Bible, the whole universe is set up to showcase the glory and the majesty of God. He made the universe big, and he made you and me small. That's why our greatest moments in this life are moments of self-forgetfulness, moments where we feel small. I don't know what that's been for you. For me, it was in the Jordanian desert in a place called Wadi Rum, and you look up at the stars at night, and it's the place on this earth with the naked eye. You can see the greatest amount of the Milky Way with the naked eye. And I felt small in that moment, consciously aware that I'm small, God is big, and it's all about his glory. I don't know what that moment is for you. And the big idea here is we need to maintain the mystery of God. We don't know his ways. His ways are higher than ours. He tells us in the book of Isaiah, his thoughts are greater than ours. We don't know the mind of God. Let's maintain the mystery of God's control. One person who tried not to maintain that mystery is Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. He was a doctor, amongst other things. He used to play around with different forms of anesthesia. One anesthesia put him under, and he remembered the thought before consciousness and unconsciousness. He thought as he was going under, he learned the secret of the universe. And so as he came out, he called a stenographer in. He gathered some people around and said, I'm going to put myself back under this anesthesia again. I'm going to try to utter the words aloud that give me the answer to the mystery of the universe, and I want you to write them down and tell me when I wake up. So he went under anesthesia, he uttered some words, he fell asleep, and then when he woke up, he eagerly asked the stenographer, what did I say was the answer to the mystery of the universe? And what she read aloud was, the strong smell of turpentine prevails throughout the universe. It's comical. It's foolish to think that we can understand the mystery of God, that we can even understand the mind of God. Let's hold on to it. Let's let God be God. Job finished the worst day of any man's life holding on to the mysterious comfort of the sovereignty of God. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And my hope as we look at Job chapter 2, as it gets worse, is that we can let God's mysterious control be our comfort in this life, in suffering and in flourishing. As we look at the text, the first 6 verses, Job 2, 1 through 6, we see a heavenly meeting initiated by God We saw last week that God allows suffering. It's a next level thing to consider that God initiated the meeting with Satan. Satan was going to and fro on the earth, looking for his next person to kill, steal, and destroy from, to deceive. And God encounters him and he says, have you thought of my servant Job? God brought Job to the attention of Satan. It's a hard thing to grasp. What we want God to say is, Satan, go away. Job has endured too much. We want him to say, you've had enough, Satan. It's time for you to stop. And yet what God does is says, behold, my servant Job. And if you're like me, the thoughts start to creep up. God, what are you all about? Why are you doing this? What are you trying to accomplish through this? These what and why questions. And yet we need to calm our hearts by remembering that God's mysterious control is our only comfort, even as readers, as we look in on Job. We have this desire for God to relent, for God to stop, for God to push Satan back, because we actually think, what if that was me? What if I was in Job's shoes, a blameless and righteous man, and yet going through all this suffering? We would want God to relent. And yet in his mysterious sovereignty, he initiates with Satan so that Satan then can go sift Job more, can cause more affliction. It's incredible to see. God's mysterious control is our only comfort. We hear Job echo at the end of chapter 1. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And we have to remain in that posture as well as we enter into chapter 2 and see it get worse. Next, in verses 7 through 8, we see Satan torments Job again in his lonely suffering. Job goes and afflicts Satan with sores from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. He can find no relief. The man who had just lost everything, had just lost all of his children. He's carrying the emotional and spiritual pain of all that, and now his body is afflicted. Can you imagine? External pain, internal pain, and he can find no relief. In fact, the place he goes to find relief, he gets a broken shard of pottery, and he starts scraping his sores just to find even an ounce of relief. And we see that he's doing it on the ash heap. The city that he's living in, what we actually understand from scholars is this is the city dump, where they take their rubbish out there and they burn it. They have a constant simmering fire to get rid of their rubbish. And Job goes out there away from the vibrancy of the city, away from friends, away from his wife. And he's alone in his physical and emotional and spiritual misery. The man, the greatest man in all the East, now alone in the ashes of the city dump, like a leper with sores all over his body, from honor to shame, from comfort to calamity. And yet it's all sifted through the sovereign hands of God. And what we see then is at the end of the affliction that Satan causes right here, Job's loss of health and Job's loss of honor proves to be too much for his wife. We see in verse 9, the greater suffering actually afflicts Job here. His wife comes and says, curse God and die. Job, do the very thing that Satan has wanted you to do all along. Satan doesn't want you to remain faithful to God. In your suffering, Satan wants you to value the treasure over the treasure giver. Curse God and die. End it all, Job. And Job responds, wife, you are talking like somebody who is foolish. You're talking like somebody who doesn't know the faithfulness and the sovereignty of God. He's gentle with her, it seems. And he knows that his wife has experienced the similar suffering that he's experienced. And yet he rebukes her. You are not valuing the sovereignty of God. For those who are married, you know that all else can be going wrong, and yet if your spouse is with you and behind you, you can endure a long time. Even here, though, after all the suffering Job has been through, he loses his partner in life. He loses his confidant. Can you imagine the greater suffering that he goes through. Even here, as his wife turns her back on him and turns her back on God, Job held on to God's mysterious control as his only comfort. In verse 10, beautifully, we see Job proves Satan to be the liar that he is. Satan said that Job only loves you because of the things you give him. And Job proves right here, just like he proved in chapter 1, that he loves God for God and not the things that God gives him. Verse 10, the rhetorical question that Job says to his wife, shall we receive good and not evil from God? It's an echo back to chapter 1, verses 20 and 21. Rhetorically, Job knows God gives and God takes away, and he's good, and his mysterious control is Job's comfort, and he remains faithful. Chapter 10 ends with Job not sinning and remaining faithful to God in the worst of conditions, and he proves Satan to be the liar that he is. Job knows that comforts and calamities both come from the sovereign hand of God. Job shows us how to resist the devil in our afflictions. We trust God. He's in control and he's for our good, friends. We worship God. He gives and he takes away, but blessed be his name. God's mysterious control is indeed our comfort. As we land, 2 reasons why Job was able to finish chapter 2 after incredible suffering and remain faithful to God. First reason, Job knew that God is the creator and he has creator rights. He's not the participant. God sets the rules. God governs. God guides and God sustains. Job knew this convictionally and he experienced it. He lived it out. Anything that comes to us, Job knew, had been sifted through the sovereign and loving hands of God. God allows what he allows for his reasons, and sometimes, most of the time, those reasons aren't for us to know. And Job allowed God to be God. He knew convictionally that God has creator rights because he is the creator. Romans chapter 9, verses 20 and 21. Shall what is formed say to the one who forms it, why did you make me like this? Does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for common purposes? Job's humility allowed him to see God as the creator and allow him to govern as he chose. Finally, we see Job knew that we are creatures and limited in our perspective and understanding. It's foolish for us to tell the creator, it's only fair and it's only wise if you give me what I want, when I want, and how much of it I want. And Job didn't do that. We look at circumstances and we think God's trying to accomplish one thing, and yet he's actually accomplishing millions of incredible things. We look at circumstances and we see God and we think he has a particular intention, and yet his intentions are above our understanding. His ways are greater than our ways. At the end of the book of Job, after all the calamity and all the confusion, Job comes to this. In Job 42, 1-3, Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscured my plans without knowledge? And Job says, surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. Job found comfort like we can find comfort in the God whose mysterious control can settle us and let us find rest as we find comfort.